the folks at home. Thank you.
My name is Linda Martin, and I represent myself and the children in my family that have passed away from what I believe is medical neglect. My purpose of being here is I've been asking the state legislature for the last 3 years to make a change in the religious exemptions because I feel like the children need the added protection. For those who don't know my story, I was born in Boise, and I attended the Followers of Christ Church in Meridian until I left at 16 years old. I still have family members that are active in the church. And I had many children in my family that died from lack of basic medical care. Their only form of treatment was prayer and anointing with oil.
Linda, could you speak into the microphone? This is a tough room to hear, and then we lose it. Yeah, thank you.
There were no herbal supplements or alternative care, not even an aspirin for pain. The followers shun modern medicine, but the majority do go to eye doctors and dentists. My parents took us to a dentist regularly, and our eyes were checked yearly. We were allowed to have Novocaine, which is a form of medicine. We were allowed to have eye drops to dilate our eyes. That's also a form of medicine. I was told this was because they did not see dentists or eye doctors as saving a person's life. We also took our animals to be vaccinated. Our animals had regular veterinary care if they were sick or injured. I was told this was because animals have no soul and cannot go to heaven. There were a couple of deaths that had the most effect on my life, and these also raise a lot of questions about the law. The first one I will tell you about was my cousin Jerry. Little background on this, his parents were my role models when I was growing up. I did everything with them. They took me on vacations. I loved these people dearly. They loved children. They ultimately had 4 children. 3 were stillborn, 1 was born alive. Jerry was the one that was born alive. He died at 10 years old, or 11 years old, from untreated diabetes. My aunt talked to me while he was ill. He started losing weight. He was lethargic. He started sleeping all the time. A few weeks later, he went into a coma and died. I have a question about that because my uncle was not a member of the church. He was not baptized in the church, but yet he still got the religious exemption and was never charged with neglect, even though this was not his belief. So does a spouse of a parent who believes in faith healing, do they have more of a moral obligation to a child or to their spouse's religious beliefs? The other death that personally impacted me was my nephew, Stephen. He died from bronchial pneumonia just before his 3rd birthday. You have to excuse me on this one. Stephen was born with spina bifida and Arnold-Chiari malformation. Arnold-Chiari malformation is when the base of the brain is tethered into the spinal column by the spinal cord. It causes severe headaches and paralysis. My nephew was paralyzed from the waist down. He was not allowed to use a wheelchair. He was not given anything for pain. This child was forced to be on the floor and pull himself around by his fingertips. That was the only way that he could move. Just before his 3rd birthday, he died from untreated pneumonia. He drowned in his own fluids. The parents said they had no time to call for medical help, but yet they called my mother that lived a half an hour away. They called the other grandmother that lived 2 hours away. The elders of the church came in. They all prayed for this child while he was dying, but yet there was no time to call for medical help. Years later, Stephen's parents both decided to seek medical treatment when they were faced with their own illnesses. My brother ended up with a terminal heart disease that caused the pressure in his heart to build up until he ended up with a hole in his heart. The pain was so great, he went into the hospital. St. Al's flew a surgeon in from Seattle. They performed an experimental surgery on my brother that had only been performed 3 times in the United States. This prolonged my brother's life for 3 years. During that 3 years, he had massage therapy, he had physical therapy, he had pain medicines. He had everything that he denied his son. Stephen's mother had a stroke during the time that my brother was ill. She spent several weeks at the Elks Rehab Hospital getting the rehabilitation care that her son would have benefited from. She's still under medical care today. When I asked them why, they went to a doctor after they had denied all of their children medical care over the years. They said it was up to the individual choice. A 2-year-old or a 3-year-old child with disabilities does not have the capacity or the right to make that decision. These parents made the decision to let their child die, and it was a decision that they did not make for themselves. The only way I can see to prevent people from prevent parents from making a different decision for themselves than what they make for their child is to remove the religious shields in all 4 statutes. When children need stitches or bones set, the elders are called. Cuts are sewn up with a needle and thread. Bones are pulled back into place the best that the elders know how, and a crude cast is applied. This is all done without anesthetic. It's extremely painful. In the governor's task force and the fatality review board's report for 2016, they mentioned 10 deaths from 2011 to 2013. I have coroner's reports for 12 children that died between those same years. According to the governor's task force report, 10 of those children would still be alive had they received medical care. I've had a lot of concerns about the way the deaths of the children are investigated. In almost all of the coroner's reports that I've read, one thing stands out to me above everything else. Almost the first sentence in every single report is, "I was called to the Followers of Christ house for a death of a child." Do you see in any other death report for any other children, "I was called to the house of a Catholic," or "I was called to the house of a Mormon member"? Why is this treated differently? I do have copies of the 12 coroner's reports for the children. If you would like a copy for the committee, I can leave that with you. In Peaceful Valley alone, I made a list in July of 2014. There were approximately 600 burials. 210 of those were children under 18 years old. Out of those 210, 144 of those children died after Idaho implemented the religious shields in 1972. 62 of those children lived past birth. 82 were either stillborn or we don't know if they lived or not. Those are headstones that only have one date or no dates. There are children that are in unmarked graves that we have no idea who they are or even how they died. Because of the Idaho privacy laws, there's no way to have access to all of the records of the children in that cemetery, so you could actually get a clear idea of how they died or how many of them could have been saved. I also have death certificates for children going back to 1900. If you read the ones from 1900 up to present time, they're very similar. These children were denied medical care. Their cause of death ranged from pneumonia, cholera, One even said that the child ate too much fruit and there was no time to get medical help for her. I think out of the 30 that I have that are over 50 years old, there was maybe 5 accidents. The rest of them were all preventable illnesses. Most of the deaths, a large percentage, are caused from pneumonia and diabetes. These children would still be alive after one trip to a doctor to get a prescription for either insulin or an antibiotic. When I decided to ask the legislature to help these children and to make changes, I didn't take that lightly. This is my family. I care deeply about my family, but I care more about the children and how they're suffering. The way these kids die is inhumane. A child should not have to drown in their own fluids while people are praying over them. You know, a child is vulnerable. They have no choice. They depend on their parents to protect them. When two people create a life, they have an obligation to that life to protect it and to do the best of their ability to bring that child up to be an adult. That does not mean neglecting them. It does not mean letting them suffer needlessly.
Ms. Martin,
children-
if you could maybe summarize in 1 to 2 minutes, because I would like to allow a few minutes for questions from the working group, please.
I have one more example on how these laws affect children and how it fails. July 2nd, 2010, there was an ATV accident near Marsing. A 17-year-old boy was critically injured. He was life-flighted to St. Alphonsus Hospital. Law enforcement was called in, and against the advice of doctors and against lawmakers' advice, the parents were allowed to remove this critically injured child from St. Alphonsus emergency room because of the religious exemption. I heard that this man lived. I do not know what long-term injuries he still has. And, you know, I have been to trials in Oregon of people that were convicted of manslaughter in the death of their children. No one wins. Parents lose a child. Other children in that family lose a parent growing up. And it's all unnecessary because I was taught, like most people in the church were taught, that we were to obey the laws of the land. If these statutes are removed, most of these people will follow the law. You're not going to prevent every single one of them, but you will stop a lot of it. And you will help young people, young couples that have children that want to take their child to a doctor. They can say, it's the law, we have to. They don't have to worry about their parents shunning them. They don't have to worry about the church turning on them. And with that, I will go ahead and defer to the chairman and the committee for questions.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your personal story. That's very important to us and very valuable, and thank you. Committee. I don't see a question, but that doesn't mean we won't have one a little bit later. So, Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Linda, thank you also for presenting. You described that if we were to remove these exemptions, families may make different choices for their children. Could it also be that families would continue making the same choices for their children?
It is possible that families would make the same decisions for their children, but I defer back to Oregon. Oregon repealed their religious statutes in 2011. Since 2009, there have only been 3 deaths in Oregon that are faith-related that have been reported. Those 3 were actually Church of the Firstborn members, which are closely related to the followers with the same beliefs. I attended the last trial in 2014. Most of the parents I have talked to, the young parents that are in the church, and the people that are in the church in Oregon City have indicated to me that they would like to have these laws changed because it takes the responsibility away from them. It's like when I brought this up and brought it to the attention of the public, I had family members that threatened to have me arrested if I ever contacted them again because my opinion is different than theirs. I have seen children that disagreed with the faith healing, and then they had a parent or a sibling die. They were not allowed to go to those funerals. They were not welcome in the family anymore. My brother had a disagreement with my nephew over the faith healing. My nephew was not allowed to go to his father's funeral, even though his father sought medical treatment before he died. We can't stop all bank robbers. We can't stop murders. We can pass laws that will prevent it. And that's all I'm asking you to do, is to remove these religious shields so there's no confusion. These laws confuse teachers. They confuse most mandated reporters because it gives them the impression that if a parent is a faith-healing parent, they cannot intervene on behalf of the child. When my nephew was ill, I actually called Health and Welfare, and I explained the situation and what religion my brother and his wife belonged to. They said, "We're sorry, they're not doing anything illegal. We cannot help that child." Do you know how hard that is on other family members to have to sit and watch a child suffer and have your hands tied and do nothing?
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Committee members? Okay, Linda, thank you. I think you drove quite a ways to get here.
I actually flew in tonight.
You
or
flew in,
last night.
yeah, so thank you for your commitment to being here today.
And Mr. Chairman, if any of the committee members want any of the news stories that will help clarify some of this information, I do have copies of all the coroner's reports. I have copies of news stories from Oregon at the time that they were changing their laws and what they were considering at the time too. If anybody finds any of that helpful, I would be happy to email a copy.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me here today.
Ms. Martin, you might leave a copy of that with our legislative staff